Hi, I'm here today to tell you how to use Blackboard Collaborate to arrange either virtual office hours or a short session with your class. So we'll begin by showing you where you start off with here on Blackboard. Right here we go. And so when I start off on Blackboard, this is what I normally see, right? And so you'll have your courses where you're instructor. I'm just going to go into this course right here, and we'll see what that looks like for us. So you'll see a number of different options down here, including virtual classroom. This is something that I added to my menu, and I'll show you how to do that. If you come down to course management, you'll see a lot of different options. But if you see under course tools, you may see a number of different things available. For example, Blackboard Collaborate Ultra, which is the tool that I'm using right now. If you don't see that tool under there, you can add it by going to Customization and Tool Availability. You can check at Tool Availability to see what you have available. Now you'll notice here that I didn't include Blackboard Collaborate or the Course Room, the Course Mashup. And you can include all of those tools if you'd like as well. You can go through and see what they do and how they work. So I'll show you what happens when I do that. When I say submit here, then all of those tools suddenly become available to me. And you'll see that there's this other option called Blackboard Collaborate. This is a slightly different set of software that you can also use. Basically works the same way as Blackboard Collaborate Ultra, but the Ultra allows for students to log into the virtual classroom with their browser, whereas Blackboard Collaborate requires them to log in with a downloaded program. So I added this Blackboard Collaborate as virtual classroom up here. This can be done by clicking on this plus area right here, and then you're going to add something called a tool link. And when you add a tool link, you want to name it something. I might name it virtual classroom, for example. And then I'm going to try to find it on this list, and you can see that there's a number of other things on here, but I'm going to choose Blackboard Collaborate Ultra, for example, and make it available to users. If you wanted to use regular Blackboard Collaborate, you would use the scheduling manager, but I'll just use the Blackboard Collaborate Ultra, available to users right now. And then I would say submit, but I've already done this, I've already set it up, so I'm not going to add it. But this is how you can add this to your menu. And then you can move the menu items around by using this key right here, up, down, and so forth. If you ever wanted to see what a student can see for the menu, you can always click on this Enter Student Preview option, and then you'll see what students are able to see. So you can see, they can see the virtual classroom if they log into Blackboard or normal. But I'm going to exit this preview right now. I always usually delete the preview user data. That's in case you wanted to save a sample user if you're doing some grading or something like that. You could save that user data, but I don't usually find pause to have to do that. I'm going to delete the student data, the sample, the preview student, and then here we have virtual classroom, which I could click on and start a Blackboard Collaborate session right now. So when I click on this, I have Blackboard Collaborate Ultra that comes up, and there's a number of different things that are available. So one thing I have is something called the Course Room, which I've set up and it's unlocked and available. And you can set this up when you first set up Blackboard Collaborate Ultra to have a course room that students can come in, drop by, say hello or say goodbye, that sort of thing. That's up to you. If you don't want it, you can make it unavailable. You can come over here and say lock course room, for example. But I have this open just in case students come in. I'll get a notice, and then I can actually go and check it out. This is not for everybody, but it works for me. If you want to be a little more official and say, let's all meet or let's try to meet at a particular time, you can create a session. And you create a session by saying, okay, this is going to be office hours, for example. And the office hours today are going to begin at 11:30. I don't know, maybe they'll end at 12:30. Maybe they'll end a little bit sooner. I'm going to say that they're only going to go to 11:45 for right now. You can actually change this afterwards as well. What you'll notice is that some other things popped up as I was entering the event details. One thing that popped up is this anonymous dial-in. This allows anybody to call in. Let's say they don't have internet access and they can't use their cell phone data for whatever reason, but they do have the ability to call. Then they can call in. You can copy this phone number with the PIN and send it on over to the students in your class by email, let's say, and then you might be able to have some of them who are at lower bandwidth, for example, call in and at least be able to hear the session. This allows for guest access. The other thing that you want to make sure is that you have the guest role set at participant. Typically, that's what you want. You could have presenters and moderators if you had guest lecturers or things like that, but participant is usually what you want. And then if you wanted to send a link to everybody in an email, this is actually usually the easiest way to let students know what's going on. You can copy the link that's available here and then paste it into an email that you send to your class, either through BlackBoard or through an email list that you've set up in another way. So this is how you can set up a BlackBoard Collaborate session fairly easily. You want to set the start and the end times. You could have an open session. That's what my course room is when I said it's unlocked and available. But if you're going to have a specific amount of time, it's good to set it like this. You could set a schedule so that it repeats every week, for example, at the same time. You do want to allow early entry, typically. 15 minutes before start time is okay. I actually think 30 minutes before start time is even better. So if you're going to set this up, it's good to set this up well ahead of time so that students can come in, test their technology, make sure that they can hear or see things. You don't necessarily even have to be in the room when they're testing their equipment, but it's good to allow some early entry and often provide a description. Here is our virtual office hours, for example. And then you may want to look at some of the different session settings that you can have. The default attendee role should be participant typically. You could allow recording downloads, so that means students can record as they need to and look at things later. I think that's not a necessarily terrible idea, but you may have other ideas. I usually discourage people from using the anonymized chat messages. You want to know who's saying what to you, otherwise it's difficult. That may not always be the case. Maybe you do want to anonymize it because you don't want students to be feel intimidated by asking questions. So you can try this out for once or twice, but typically it's more useful to know who's asking the questions or who's making comments. If you have moderators, you can think about doing something like this, although I've never done it. Typically, you want all of these checked for participants. You want them to be able to interact as much as they can. If you need to change that, you can. You can say things like, well, maybe I only want participants to be able to look at me and hear me, in which case you can turn off the share audio, share video. Or if you don't like the chats, you can shut it all down. Draw on whiteboards and files. I think this is a nice thing to have so that students can upload things and share them with you. But you could turn that feature off too if you wanted to. If you want to allow attendees to join using a telephone, this needs to be checked. If you uncheck it, they can't. Private chat is something that you can think about monitoring in one way or another. Right now, students can privately chat with each other and you wouldn't know about it. You could turn that feature off and say that they can only privately chat with you. Or you could even be able to see all of those chats. I think that's a little Orwellian, but you can do that if you want. So these are the settings that I have set up. These are the default settings. I think they're typically fine. And I'm just going to say save, and we're going to move in to a session. So here's my office hours session, right? It's now saved. If a student logged into Blackboard, this is what they would see. They'd be able to click in here. It's in progress. They click on here, and you can click on join session. If you're directly in the Blackboard site, if you received the link, you'd have something similar where you click on the link, and away it would begin. So this is our virtual classroom now being set up. As you set up the virtual classroom, it's going to ask you to indicate a couple things. For example, you should share your audio so that people can hear you. You should share your video so people can see you. And I'll say this is sharing the video. This icon right here indicates whether your hand is raised or not. You can raise your hand and lower your hand. Not usually useful for the person leading the session, but very useful for students who are in the session. If you ask them to raise their hands, they can use this icon to raise or lower their hands. You also have the ability to lower people's hands if you wanted the participants in the class. Let's look at some of the menus here. So this is one of the first menus here. You can record your session by clicking on Start Recording. That will save the recorded session in the Blackboard site. So that can be useful, especially if you are doing a lecture that you're doing synchronous, but you have some students that can't make it. They can come back and see what happened during the lecture. So I can say the session is recording, for example. I can use my phone for audio. If there's a problem with the audio, I can call in and the audio can be coming from my phone, which is nice. Reporting an issue directly to Blackboard, that's pretty self-explanatory. I can get some help information about Collaborate by clicking on here. It gives me some information for tell me about Collaborate, and then also some help right here. You can read the policy, the privacy policy, and also leave the session as you might need to later on when we're done. So that's the session menu over there on the left. On the right, you've got the Collaborate panel. The Collaborate panel starts off with a chat. Chat is a very useful feature. A lot of students love to use the chat. It's a great way to engage with students, especially the ones that may be not having the highest bandwidth. They might not have a connection available to share their audio or video. Normally they can hear and see you, but sometimes you can't hear and see them. And so they can communicate with you via chat. Hello, everyone. And that when you type something into the main room like this, everybody should be able to see it. If there were other participants, you would be able to do private chats with them as well. That can be done here if you're clever and click on the right participants that you see. But if you want to see all the participants, you click on the participant window, which is right here. Right now it's just me. I have an experience indicator, which says basically how good my bandwidth is. It says whether or not I have my microphone enabled. And there's a couple other attendee controls. There's not much that I can do to myself, but with participants, you can do things like mute them, you can lower their hands, you can do other things like that, send them a private chat message. So when you try this out, check out the attendee controls that show up for the participants that will be in your room. Okay, the next thing here over on this, part of the Blackboard Collaborate window is the Share Content window. What are some of the things you can do? You can share a blank whiteboard, which is pretty nice. You can do things like draw on the whiteboard, and you can erase the whiteboard, and you can even write text on the whiteboard. And then once you're done using the whiteboard, you can point at things, for example. Then you want to say, stop sharing the whiteboard. And then that will return you to the normal screen. Say hello to everybody. And then you might want to share some things. For example, I might want to share something that I have as a presentation, right? Maybe I have a PowerPoint presentation, Keynote presentation pulled up. I can share it from the application window. Or maybe there's a particular tab I might want to share. So maybe I want to show, for example, how I edit my Open Math. So I can share that particular tab with the people. And then once I'm done sharing, there's a little thing right here that says stop sharing this tab, or stop sharing this content, and I'll stop sharing it like that. I need to go back to the window that I was in right here, and you can see I'm back to the window right here. So sharing applications and screens, very useful, something that you want to be able to do in all video conferencing. You can also try sharing files. This I haven't had as much success with because it's hard for the students to find the files after you share them, but it is in principle possible to do. If I click on add here, I could find some sort of image that I might want to share. So I'll just try to share this image right here. And it's uploaded here under the shared content. What we have found though is that students have a hard time finding where this content is being kept, right? It's kept here in the main room under the shared files indicator for the students, but they can't always find it. What I think might be better if you want to share files with students is to actually share them on Blackboard. So you can come back to the Blackboard page here, right? Not in the virtual classroom or Blackboard Collaborate Ultra, but maybe you have a section of your class called content. It might be better to upload the content here, right? So I might upload the content as an item or as a file. You can see I've actually uploaded some content on the current pandemic for the students that are in this particular class. Okay, so then that's pretty much what you want to do here on the primary content side of Blackboard Collaborate. There's some secondary content that you can create, which is called polling. Polling is quite nice because it allows you to take the temperature of the room. You can do multiple choice, yes, no, polling. So are you okay, for example? And you say start. The poll shows up for everybody in the class. I find that students respond very, very quickly to polls. The one problem is you don't necessarily know who says what. So it's not necessarily for doing evaluations. If you wanted to do an evaluation or a test or something like that, you want to set that up in Blackboard, not do it during one of these sessions. But if you just want to kind of get an idea of what people think and how they are approaching things, what they have learned and so forth, this is a pretty good thing to do. And so once you're finished with the poll, you can, you really want to say end polling if you're not going to continue it, but you can also make it, close it down, and it'll come down here as a little indicator. You can open it back up. Students can change their responses, for example, You can lock the poll if you want to make them stop and you just want to be able to refer to it later. But when you're completely done polling, you want to end the polling like that. The last thing that you can do is you can interact. You can have the students form different groups. This is a little bit more complicated. So if you want to do this, I suggest practicing it with students beforehand. But if you form breakout groups, you can do it using custom assignment, allow attendees to switch groups, and you'll have different locations. They might be group 1, group 2. You can change the names of the groups. The best thing to do here is to actually just try it out. Click on the different things and see what they do. So if you click on the name of the group, you can name it at something else if you'd like. And then you can add group members if you have them, since it's just me right now. It's really not, it doesn't make a lot of sense for me to add group members, but you usually add group members, add people to your groups by clicking on their name and then finding out which group you want to add them to. So you can do something like this, and then when you're ready, if I wanted to switch to that group, I'd press start. That's a way to put different students in different groups. When they're in the group, they can discuss with each other, but they won't hear people that are outside of their group, and you can go around visiting each of the groups. You can also add this feature, which allows the students to choose the groups or switch the groups themselves, and that can be useful once the students are aware of how groups work. You can also get rid of groups if you don't want a group to exist. You can delete them like this. I'm not going to set up this because it doesn't really work with just me talking, but I suggest if you're interested in using groups, just to try it out sort of in a low stakes way, see what the students can figure out with groups, see how it works. So that's everything in the share content window. Then finally, there's a settings window. There's things that you should check here if you're having problems with microphones or you're having problems with audio. There are some notifications settings. You can display closed captions when available. We don't have an automatic captioning. If you have somebody in your class that needs to have captioning, you can make someone a captioner. That should be provided, but you may need to talk to accessibility and the student, and if you need some additional help, feel free to email me with that and how that might work. So there's notification settings. You can look at all the different things that you get notified about during a Blackboard Collaborate session. I think the defaults are fine, but you can try out different ones if you'd like. And then if you really have a problem, you can report an issue, which is also available on the other side as well. So this is essentially everything that you can do with Blackboard Collaborate, or it's a quick tutorial on how all that works. And so let's say we're now at the end of our session. What do we want to do here? Well, when I'm at the end of the session, what I typically do is I say I want to leave the session. So I'm going to leave the session, and it's going to ask me what I thought about the whole thing. Did you have any issues? No, I didn't have any problems, so I'll just say submit and exit. And it'll say I'm done here. I can close this window now and come back over here. And if I go back to virtual classroom, I'll actually find that this session is still ongoing. So since the session is still ongoing, that means students can still join it. That's because I said it doesn't end until a minute from now at 11:45. And so if you wanted to, you could change the time. If you wanted to do that. For us, it probably doesn't matter too much. But I could change it to 11:44 if I wanted to, and that would end it sooner. But in general, you know, you might think about leaving the time a little bit open towards the end. And then if you are concerned about students coming in and getting confused because you're not there, you can modify the time at the end. And so at 11:45, this should be over. At that point, you would be able to view the reports for the session. That would include things like a recording, which we did do in the session. I didn't end the recording, so it's actually probably still recording with me not in there. But if I ended the recording, it would actually start to end it right now, and I could look at that recording after it had been processed. The other reports that are often available are the reports that say which people attended, and that's a useful one. You can take attendance that way for your sessions. You could also delete the session outright if you wanted to. And there's some other options here, like copy guest link. If somebody couldn't get into the session and you needed to remember how to get into it, you can copy that link and send it to them if the session is still in progress. All right, so I think that's essentially everything I wanted to discuss about Blackboard Collaborate Ultra. This is a crash course, so there's some things I probably didn't explain well, some things I may have missed. But I hope this was somewhat useful, somewhat informative, and if you have any questions, feel free talk to you. Thanks very much, and I wish you all the best.